now recording.
Okay, welcome everyone to Kitchen Chemistry. I've got for you experiment 4, practical 4, which is on page 39 of the workbook. And since you can't do it, I'm going to do it for you. I've got distilled water. Here's my molymod molecule. Sucrose, which is ordinary table sugar. And you can see this is huge. Salt, ordinary table salt, tiny. Ethanol, alcohol, the type that you drink. I'm not drinking this stuff. And here's my molymod of this. You might already know by now that the sucrose atoms are held together by covalent bonds. And if you don't know by now, you will soon find out that the reason I bang on so much about solubility is because covalent bonds don't fall apart in water. When you put this in your tea, it stays as the whole thing. When you put this into water, this has got an ionic bond. It's between a metal and a non-metal. This breaks apart. Because it breaks apart, there's a free electron, it will carry a charge. And so the practical today is to show that practically. So here's my little meter. I've already put distilled water into each of these. So I shall put in a little bit of sugar. I'll get some lids so that I don't throw this everywhere. Give it a good shake. It's not as soluble as you might think. It's more soluble in hot water, but okay. There's my sugar water. Here's my meter. If I put the meter in here, hopefully you can see that it's reading 0. It is reading 0, pretty much 0. Yeah? Okay. This one, I'm going to put salt in. Oops, one lump. Give that a good shake. That's dissolved much more easily. I'm just going to pour this straight on top of the sugar water, since we already know that that didn't carry a charge. Here's my meter. Put that back in there. And you can see now we've got a reading which is hard for me to read upside down. Looks like 12.4. Yeah. So that's clearly carrying a charge where the sugar water didn't. And that's because this is broken up, whereas this is still a whole molecule like that, and it's giant. Okay, the other thing that we wanted to know was, will ethanol dissolve in water? Now, if you have done the solubility part, you will know that it's the OH group that makes something soluble with water because of hydrogen bonding, and we'll talk more about that later. But you can see that sucrose has got quite a lot of OH groups. All of these are going to make it soluble in those parts, but the black carbons, where they share electrons nicely, they're not soluble. Oh, my sugar's broken apart. I must put it down there. You can see that ethanol is much smaller and it does have this 1OH group. So this should be soluble. So we'll see. Ethanol, water. I'll give it a good shake. Pretty cloudy. So we're not convinced that it's wholly soluble. If I leave it long enough, it might settle. Whether it will settle out or not, I don't know. I'll pour it back in there so that we can find out. I'm going to tip this out and we'll see if that will conduct a charge. It's actually warmed up as well, where there's a reaction going on. I can feel the tube is warm. Right, the meter's gone off. Okay. Oh, there's a tiny bit of a charge, which I think is residual charge from where I didn't wash this out because it had salty water in it. Silly me. Got any more ethanol to do that again. Yeah, that residual charge 0.3, nothing like the 12.4 that we saw before, is where I didn't wash the container out. Sorry guys, fail there. Okay, so we'll talk later about solubility. The important take-home message is that you need free electrons to carry a charge, which is what you've got when something will fall apart. When it doesn't fall apart from the molymod, when it stays whole, there's no free electrons, so there's no charge being carried. And this will also stay whole. This doesn't fall apart, so there's no charge being carried apart from the dirty cup. And this, I'll pour it back in, but this, we're not convinced that it's entirely soluble because now we can see that it's more of a colloid, you might say. No, not even. I think this is just a mess, really. Okay, hope you enjoyed that. Oh, before we stop, the questions in the table. So, sodium chloride forms ions. Yes, we said it breaks apart. Sucrose forms ions. No, stays whole. Ethanol forms ions. No, stays whole. We've got the molecules here. The type of bonding, so this is called an ionic bond, where it falls apart. And these two are covalent bonds, where they don't fall apart. And we'll talk later about the variety of covalent bonds that there are that make them somewhat soluble, is the word for it. Okay, so that's the bottom line. Oh, the last question, do you think molten ionic compounds would conduct electricity? Salt melts at about 800 degrees, so it takes quite a lot of energy to make it molten, but yes, then there would be free electrons. Sugar, if anyone's tried making toffee will know, will burn quite badly before anything else happens. So no, this is not going to conduct electricity, even molten, it will just burn, and ethanol will evaporate, so no, it won't conduct electricity either. Okay, I hope that answers some questions. Thank you. Bye.